Hi everyone, just wanted to welcome you to the Myriad Technologies webinar on the digital boardroom. Just want to introduce myself. My name is Nicholas Forbes. I'm the Managing Director of Myriad Technologies, and I'm also a director of two other companies where I sit on the board for those companies. What I've seen in that role as a board member and as a director is over the last number of years, the role that I've had to play as a director on a board has started to change. So essentially 5 years ago, as a director, I could sit outside the company. I could attend my monthly board meetings once a month, attend those meetings, work through the board pack, board papers, the profit and loss, and all of those sort of things, and could then go make a bunch of decisions around the companies and the path forward for each of those companies. The change that we've seen happen is that the expectation on directors and the expectation on the board today is to be more actively involved in understanding the decision making that is happening within companies. So in the past, I didn't have to know the detail around what decisions were made and why they were made within the company and on the daily sort of operations of the company. Today, however, there is very much an expectation on myself to have a really good, solid understanding of what is happening within the company itself. Now, those changes have been brought about through changes in legislation, as well as changes that have been pushed out by ASIC as the governing body of boards and of companies. What those changes have amounted to, or what the change in legislation has meant, is that me as a director can be personally held responsible and personally held accountable for what is happening within the company. A really good example of that is if within a company, as an example, you have a workplace health and safety incident that occurs. So something happens on a site, something happens within the office. As a director, I can now be personally held accountable for that issue and the outcomes of that issue. So what that means is that there's far more pressure on me as a director to be across a lot more information and make decisions in a much more timely manner. Recently, I attended a director's course at the Australian Institute of Company Directors, and they had a really good analogy that described what this change has meant. So 5 years ago, I said you could sit outside the company. If you think of it as, picture, for example, a year 12 formal. And at that year 12 formal, it's been held in the school hall, and in the center of the school hall is the dance floor. And on the dance floor, a bunch of people dancing away to the music. So think of that as the company, and the dance is the daily day-to-day sort of operations that's happening within the company. Up in the balcony, overseeing the dance is the directors and the board. So 5 years ago, you could sit up on the balcony and you could watch from a distance and observe what was happening within the company. The expectation today is that you can no longer sit on the balcony. You now have to actively be on the dance floor itself, walking amongst the dancers, seeing what's happening within the company on a day-to-day sort of basis, and have a good understanding of what's going on within the company. So you cannot sit from a distance and observe. You now need to be part of the company without actually being involved in the company itself. So that presents us our first challenge for a board, which is a lot more information to digest. There's a lot more accountability for individual board members and for directors, and there's far less time to make decisions. If you then go and throw something like a COVID-19 across this, or bring COVID-19 into this situation, you now see even more time pressures coming into play. So as an example, as a director, I'm essentially meeting with the board on a weekly basis to make decisions around what's happening with the pandemic. And those decisions are, it's a rapidly evolving and a rapidly changing situation. So there's new legislation that comes out every week. There's changes to Fair Work Act. There's changes to tax, all of those sort of things. So as a board, we're now having to do this on a weekly basis versus a monthly basis and make critical decisions with information that is changing almost on the fly. If you then flip across and look on the other side of the coin being the people that then present to the boards or put information together for the board, they've got the same challenges. So they have to put information together very rapidly to present out to the board for the board to make good decisions. They have to put that information together, and the big challenge they have is they have to put that information together in silos. So you don't want, for example, the operational people being able to see the information being put together by the financial team. And you don't want to necessarily have the financial team and the operational team being able to see the information being put together by the mergers and acquisition team. So for them, the challenge is very much more information, less time, but even worse, having to do it in a set of silos and very secure silos. So here at Myriad, what we did to adapt to the situation and to address this challenge, and we've seen this with a number of our clients as well, is that we've taken to using Office 365 fully across the board to manage our board meetings, manage our board, and collaborate as a board and as directors. So we use things like SharePoint, we use things like Teams, and all the other related apps that sit across Office 365 to try and solve these challenges of more information, less time, better decision making. So very brief sort of introduction just to set the scene. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass across to James, and James is going to show you some very concrete examples of how you actually solve this problem. James, I'll pass across to you.
Cool. Thank you very much, Nicholas. Hi, everybody. My name's James Milne, and I'm the CTO at Myriad Technologies, but I also hold a fellow directorship along with Nicholas. So I'm really excited today to be able to walk you guys through some of the demonstrations of what technologies we use within our own organization. So as we go through the demonstration, I would highly encourage you guys, if you have any questions, you will see that there is actually a little chat window, and we have Nathan standing by to capture any of your questions. So feel free to type any questions into the chat window, and we'll either take them as we go or we'll hold off towards the end. So jumping across into the demonstrations, as Nicholas mentioned, this board portal has actually been provisioned on Office 365. And you can currently see it on the screen, and this is where, as a board or a team of executives, we can come together on a regular basis, and we can see when the upcoming meetings have been scheduled. We can also see any of the board packs which have been put together for those various meetings. We can see any announcements which are relevant to the executive team and the board. Over here on the right, if I'm looking for the contact details of the chairperson, you can see that it's Dean. I've got all of his contact details. I can also see what files he's been working on. We can also see who the other executives are who are part of this board team. Now, as the company secretary, it's my responsibility to schedule the upcoming meetings. So I can come in here whenever I'm ready, and I can schedule an upcoming event. Now, let's say that I wanted to start planning for the June board meeting. I can simply come in, schedule a date in June. Let's say we're going to meet on June the 1st, because we want to meet on the first day of the month. We're going to take a couple of hours to actually go through the meeting. And at this point, I'm going to gloss over some of the other fields, because you'll see that after I schedule this meeting, we're going to have a workflow kick off in the background, and it's going to actually help provision the board pack for me. So I don't actually have to worry too much about actually going off and creating the documents ready for the board pack. So what I mean by that is, if I go in and have a look at the calendar, which all of my fellow directors have access to, you can see if I go across to June, you can see there's the June Board of Directors meeting. If I drill into the meeting, you can see a couple of things have actually been added to this appointment request. And this has been done automatically by a workflow in the background. So you can see we've now got a URL for the board pack. So in my role as the secretary, I could actually start emailing that link out to trusted individuals and start asking them to upload content into the board pack. Now I could click on this link and navigate straight through to the board pack, but taking a step back, I'll just demonstrate that what's actually happened in the background is within the documents of the board meeting site, you can see that the June BOD board pack has actually been provisioned. If I click on it and navigate through into the board pack, you can see the workflow has automatically provisioned an agenda and a meeting minutes. So that's taken a fair amount of administrative effort off my plate. I don't have to go off and think about collating the agenda or the minutes or finding the templates and uploading them. The workflow has actually automatically provisioned the minutes and the agenda for our upcoming meeting. Now, I might already have some documentation that I want to actually add straight into the board pack. So for example, somebody may have already given me a corporate report. I can simply drag that and drop that into the board pack, and that's how easy it is for me to upload additional content into the board pack. Now, as Nicholas was discussing, the other facet to our board meetings is asking various business groups to create submissions. Now, these could be reports, they could be recommendations, they could be proposals. And part of the challenge there is we need a number of different business units to be able to collaborate on those different document assets and submit them to the board for approval or review in the upcoming meetings. Now, what we've got here as part of the board portal is there is actually a submissions library, and you can see each business group has its own folder, and we can obviously secure these folders based on who should be able to see the appropriate content. So as Nicholas alluded to, we don't want the people in finance being able to see what's happening in mergers and acquisitions. So when I'm ready, if I want to invite somebody else to come and collaborate with me, if I have a number of other documents, such as balance sheets and financial data, I can navigate into the finance library and know that only the finance group would have access to that library. I can now drag these documents into the submission folder, and once again, they're quickly and easily uploaded into the submissions library. What's exciting now is if these documents are still a work in progress, I can choose to actually share these documents out to my colleagues and ask them to continue contributing and collaborating on those documents. At some stage, once we've finished collaborating and we're ready for those documents to become part of the board pack, I, as the secretary, can come back into the submissions folder. I can actually select one or more documents that I'd wish to move across to the board pack. And you'll notice I've got the option to move or copy these documents. So I'm going to go ahead and move my business plan into the board pack for June. And it's as simple as clicking the Move Here button, and you'll see a little message letting me know that the system has moved the business plan from the submissions finance folder across into the board pack. So this gives me control over what information is aggregated into the board pack, which is then tabled at the next board meeting. Now, as you guys can all probably appreciate, in these really challenging times, we are spending so much time on net meetings, especially using Microsoft Teams. Now, one of the super convenient things about Teams is we can now access and jump into a meeting on any device, anywhere, anytime. And we've actually chosen to run a number of our board meetings through Microsoft Teams. So at this point, I'll switch over to the board team, which is associated with the board site. So when it comes time for us to actually start hosting the meetings, you can see we can jump into the board team. We have access to all of the files. We have a wiki. We have access to the board packs. So when it comes time for the meeting, as the chair or the company secretary, we can drill into those board packs and be accessing them during the meeting. We can also be making changes to the agenda or the minutes while we're going through the meeting, and SharePoint will actually track all of those changes. We can also view the upcoming events and future meetings. We also have the ability to track our resolutions during the meeting. So once we reach a resolution, we can simply come in here, create a new resolution. And record the fact that the board actually reached a consensus. We also, during the meeting, have the ability to use products like Microsoft Planner to capture action items. So as people table proposals and make recommendations to us, we can actually go in and decide that we can put tasks on different people to follow up and perhaps give us an update at a future meeting. So you can see we can set future dates. We can assign that to individuals who are part of the team or anybody within the organization if we needed to. And that's how easy it is to actually track our tasks and keep people accountable for the action items out of each meeting. Now, while we're in the Microsoft Teams environment, we wanted to probably touch on a few other things which would be relevant to the board, such as the ability to jump into different projects or initiatives, which are all part of the Teams ecosystem. So for example, one of the popular solutions that we deploy is the ability to track projects. And the key aspect of being able to track parts of those projects is the project risks. So as a board, if somebody highlights to us that project 5 is actually having various issues, you can see that we can actually dive directly into the operational information, as Nicholas was alluding to. We can actually go in and stick our nose in directly into the project team and actually view their risks. Now, at the conclusion of our meeting, as the company secretary, it's usually my responsibility to actually capture the minutes, the agenda, and any other assets that were considered as part of the meeting. Now, from a compliance perspective and an auditability perspective, you can see as I navigate into any of these documents within the board pack, I can actually view the version history on each and every document in the board pack. So that gives me the confidence that the version of the report or plan that was discussed in the board meeting has not been modified, or if it has, I can actually see exactly who modified it on what date and what time. Now, at the conclusion of the meeting, I can also not only version control the whole board pack, but I can capture a snapshot of all of the documents that were discussed during that board meeting. This gives me further accountability that I now have a snapshot of the exact versions which were used during that meeting. And of course, once again, we have the ability to track the version history across the whole board pack. Now with that, I'd like to conclude the demonstration and open the floor up for any possible questions.
James, there are some questions that have come through. So the first one is from Gaynor, who's asking if you're able to export the captured version
Of the board pack. So The fact that the board pack is actually version controlled as a complete entity, we can either synchronize that down to disk or export it out to a file system. We also have the opportunity to actually copy it off to a record archive to make sure that we can lock it down and make sure that there's no future changes made to it at all. So just to demonstrate a couple of those, we've already talked about the capture version, but there is also the, sorry, if I was running a slightly different browser, there's usually the option to open the documents library in Windows Explorer, and then I can simply copy the whole board pack out to disk.
Hi James, we have another question around, is there options for directors to get to the board packs offline?
Sure. You would have noticed, hopefully, that there is so depending on which device you want to use to actually access those board packs, one option could be if you're using a PC, there is a sync client. So you will notice that there is a sync button up in the toolbar, which I currently have my mouse pointer hovering over. If I click on the sync button, that will basically copy either the current folder or the whole library down to my laptop. And that will ensure that while I'm roaming around in the field, completely disconnected from the network, I'll actually be able to get all the updates to that library synchronized down to my laptop. So that will not only allow me to access it any time, but it'll also allow me to access it offline when I'm completely disconnected. Of course, if you're using the mobile clients as well to access Teams, the fact that we have the board packs displayed through Microsoft Teams as a tab, you'll be able to access them through the mobile device as well.
James, the next question is around if it's standard or custom workflows.
We have, within the Microsoft Office 365 ecosystem, we have a number of options there. We could, so what I've demonstrated today is definitely not out of the box workflows. This is something that we've had to create. And as we discussed, being a technology company, this is something that we found relatively easy to do. But for an average business user out there, I think that creating these workflows would be a bit of a challenge. Part of this demonstration, we've also chosen to use a product called Nintex Workflow, which, as a demonstration, if I open up Nintex Workflow adds the ability to build these workflows in a drag and drop manner. So looking back at the demonstration that we've just been through, when I created the calendar event, I actually had a workflow trigger and go off and create all of those documents for me. If I wanted to create another workflow on the document library, you can see I've now jumped into the Nintex Workflow Designer, and I have a number of items here that I can use to drag and drop onto the canvas to actually build a workflow. And then for me to actually deploy it, it's a matter of simply clicking the publish button at the top. So hopefully that answers that question.
James, the next question is, can you use Planner as the scheduling and for managing the tasks?
Oh, of course. Microsoft Planner does have the capability for us to manage those tasks. We can use those tasks through workflows or, as we demonstrated, as part of the meeting.
One more question that's come through, just around catering for external directors that are not part of the company.
Yeah. As in, can we support external directors?
Yep, so most probably to do with security and accounts and that sort of thing.
Of course. So this is a configuration option. It's definitely not something that you should be doing out of the box, but your tenant, your Office 365 tenant, can be federated with other organizations to allow people from other organizations to access, in this example, the board portal and then that way they can log in, and they'd have to use their corporate identity to actually access the content. So once again, we can track who they are and what they've been modifying within our board portal. Well, if there's no further questions, I'll hand back to Nathan.
Thanks, James. All right, hi all, I'm Nathan. I'm the National Sales Manager for Myriad Technologies. I hope you found today's webinar helpful and insightful. While what we have shown you today can be used to support whilst you're all working in isolation or your company directors are, what I hope you all take away from it is what could also provide value as we start to return back to our offices and normal places of work. We will keep the Q&A and the event open for another 5 to 10 minutes if you have any other questions. Otherwise, feel free to contact us directly after the event about this particular solution or any other challenges you might be facing. Just like to thank Nick and James for giving up their time today, and thank you all for attending. Hi James, we have another question that's come through around integration with API calls with service desk software or ServiceNow for changes, approvals, etc.
Hi, it's Andrew here. So have we ever tried to do interconnection between different service desk softwares such as Heat or ServiceNow? So using the service desk to do the board approvals for change management, etc. Certainly haven't, but it is something that is certainly capable of being done. Again, using Nintex Workflow Cloud, we have access to a lot of different connectors. Nintex Office 365 product has connectors both into ServiceNow, and we can build a custom connector into Heat, etc. So we would be able to build a workflow that allowed you to push that change request out to the board and have the board reply and the approval come back into the service desk solution.
Andrew, for that sort of interaction, would you be looking at things like Flow for something like that, or something like an Nintex?
So it really depends on the product that we're trying to integrate with. In some cases, we could use Flow. In many cases, we can use Nintex. Flow does have a limited number of connectors. They are building and improving on those every day. The challenge with Flow is going to be what comes down to what your licensing costs are. Many of those connections and integration options within Flow are all premium products. So unless you're running on E5, then you're going to have to pay for additional licensing.
Once again, Nicholas here, I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining up to this webinar. If you want to know any more information, please get hold of Nathan at nathan.pierce@myriadtech.com.au, and thank you for your time.